The Dralethian warship Molten Vengeance cut through the void, like a blade forged in the heart of a dying star. Its angular, segmented hull pulsed with the dull glow of orange, red plasma conduits, the ship's brutalist architecture radiating an aura of industrial might. Commander Draltal stood motionless on the command deck, his obsidian carapace reflecting the dim light of the tactical displays. His 4 eyes, 2 forward, facing 2 recessed along his temples, flickered with cold calculation as he studied the holographic projection of the system ahead. The world below, a blue-green orb wreathed in thin clouds, was undefended. No orbital platforms, no fleet signatures, just a scattering of primitive satellites and the faint thermal bloom of surface cities. The Dralethian High Command had assured him this was a simple extermination, a cleansing the species here had begged for aid, broadcasting their desperation into the void, and in doing so had sealed their fate. The Galactic Accord forbade such weakness. Draltal's mandibles twitched in disdain. "Scan complete, Commander," Vashdor intoned from the sensor station, his voice a low grinding hum. The scientist's segmented fingers danced across the console, feeding data into the warship's tactical net. Minimal energy signatures, no military-grade shielding. Their largest structures appear to be administrative centers. No weapons. A ripple of amusement passed through the bridge crew. Some clicked their armored plates in derision. Others flexed their claws, eager for the slaughter to come. Draltal exhaled through his ventral vents, the sound like steam escaping a pressurized chamber. "Prepare the orbital bombardment, standard cleansing pattern." Vashdor hesitated. "Commander, there is one anomaly." Draltal turned, his carapace plates shifting with the motion. "Explain." The scientist gestured to a secondary display where a single flickering data point pulsed at the edge of the system. A vessel, small minimal energy output, but its trajectory suggests it was moving toward us before it powered down. Draltal's eyes narrowed. A scout? A survivor from some forgotten patrol? Destroy it? Vashdor input the command. The Molten Vengeance's primary plasma lances hummed to life, their cores flaring like miniature suns. A targeting lock resolved, and then dissolved. The ship was gone, no debris, no explosion, just absence. Draltal's claws flexed. "Rescan." Vashdor obeyed. The sensors swept the void again, their orange, red tendrils of energy probing the darkness. A glitch, a sensor echo. It had to be. A new alert blared across the bridge. "Commander." Vashdor's voice was sharp. Multiple contacts inside the perimeter. Draltal whirled. The holographic display erupted with crimson markers. Dozens of them, hundreds, emerging from the black like specters, their silhouettes angular, their hulls dark as the void itself. No engine flares, no energy spikes, just presence. Human presence. The first transmission crackled across the comm, a voice calm, measured, utterly devoid of fear. "This is Colonel Elizabeth Davis of the United Sol Defense Fleet. You are in violation of sovereign human space. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded." Draltal's blood ran cold. They had scanned the system. They had seen nothing, because humanity had hidden everything. Section Fe. Shadows. In the scan, the Dralethian flagship, Molten Vengeance, hung in the void, its angular hull pulsing with the dull glow of its forge. Core. Commander Draltal's claws flexed against the command console, the dark metal groaning under the pressure. His secondary eyelids flicked sideways in agitation, the bioluminescent veins beneath his scaled skin flaring orange, red with rising tension. Impossible. The sensors had swept this system 3 times. 3 times. They had confirmed emptiness, just as the Galactic Accord's intelligence had promised. A backwater, a graveyard, a species too primitive to even register as a threat. The holographic display before him shimmered, its projections warping as new data flooded in. The human ships were everywhere, not just at the perimeter. Not just in the shadows. They were inside the Dralethian formation, their dark hulls slipping between his cruisers like ghosts. No energy signatures, no drive trails, no warning. Vashdor's talons danced across the sensor array, his voice a low, grating hiss. Commander, their stealth systems, they're not just masking emissions, they're bending light, they're erasing themselves. Draltal's spines flared along his back, a cold, creeping dread settled in his gut. This was no accident, this was a trap. Aboard the human dreadnought Pale Horse, Colonel Elizabeth Davis watched the Dralethian fleet through the tactical display, her fingers resting lightly on the armrest of her command chair. The alien ships were massive, brutalist slabs of dark metal, their hulls segmented like the carapace of some ancient predator. Orange plasma flickered in their reactor cores, casting long molten shadows across their flanks. Beautiful, predictable, status, she murmured. Captain John Torres didn't look up from his console. All stealth corvettes in position, railgun batteries charged, boarding teams ready. His voice was steady, but she could hear the edge beneath it, the same coiled tension humming through the entire bridge. They had trained for this. They had waited for this. Davis exhaled slowly. The Dralethians had come expecting prey. They would leave knowing fear. Draltal's comms officer stiffened. Commander, new signal. Audio only. A hiss of static. Then, this is your final warning. The human's voice was calm. Too calm. Stand down, or be dismantled. Draltal's jaws clenched. The arrogance, the audacity. He was Dralethian. His people had forged empires in fire. They did not surrender. Target their lead vessel, he snarled. Full barrage. The molten Vengeance's weapons flared to life, its plasma lances charging with a deep resonant hum. The humans didn't even flinch. Their ship simply moved. Not in retreat, in formation. The void screamed. The void screamed. Not in the way Dralethian plasma cannons screamed. That familiar, industrial roar of superheated matter tearing through vacuum. This was something else. Something wrong. Draltal's claws dug into the armrests of his command throne as the molten Vengeance's sensor arrays overloaded, their displays flickering with static. The human ships, those sleek, angular predators, had scattered like shrapnel from a ruptured hull, their movements too precise, too coordinated to be evasion. They weren't running, they were encircling, a low guttural growl built in his throat. His bridge crew, hardened veterans all, shifted uneasily. The scent of molten metal and ozone thickened the air, but beneath it, something new coiled out. Report, Draltal snapped. Vashdor, his chief scientist, hunched over a flickering terminal, his copper-plated fingers flying across the interface. Their energy signatures, they're masking them. Our scans show nothing but empty space where their ship should be. Impossible. Yet, it is happening. Vashdor's voice was tight, his spines flaring in agitation. Their hulls absorb our scans. Their engines leave no residual heat. It's as if they've weaponized silence. Draltal's crest flared. Weaponized silence. A contradiction in terms. Yet the humans had made it real. Outside, the void twisted again, the lead human vessel, indomitable. Their transmissions named it, unfolded. Not like a Dralethian warship, its brutalist plates shifting with hydraulic certainty. No, this was something fluid, something alive. Sections of its hull slid apart, revealing not weapon ports, but eyes. No, not eyes. Vashdor inhaled sharply. Commander, the Indomitable fired. Not plasma, not kinetics. A searing, blue-white beam lanced across the black, so bright it burned afterimages into Draltal's vision. It struck the molten Vengeance's forward shields and pushed, not with force, but with data. The ship's systems convulsed. Alerts shrieked as firewalls crumbled, as security protocols dissolved like slag in a forge. They're hacking us. Vashdor hissed. Not through code, through light. Draltal snarled, slamming a fist into the armrest. Cut external receivers. Go dark. The beam flickered, shifted, and resolved into a face. Colonel Elizabeth Davis, her image filled every screen, her gaze level, her voice calm. You were warned. Then the Indomitable's railguns fired. The first round struck the Molten Vengeance's starboard flank, punching through armor meant to withstand solar flares. The second hit the engines, shearing through plasma conduits with contemptuous ease. Draltal's ship lurched, its gravity stabilizers failing. The deck tilted, throwing crew into walls. Alarms wailed. The scent of burning circuits and scorched metal flooded the bridge. And still, the human's face remained. Watching Draltal bared his teeth. This wasn't war. This was dissection. The humans weren't just fighting. They were teaching. And the lesson was simple. You saw nothing, because we let you. The Molten Vengeance reeled, its once proud hull, now a bleeding wound in the void. Draltal clawed his way back to the command throne, his claws digging furrows into the molten steel plating. His secondary hearts hammered, his vision pulsing with the emergency lighting's dull orange glow. Impossible. The humans had fired without charging, without signatures, without warning. The Dralethian fleet had scanned the Indomitable 1,000 times, its armor, its reactors, its weapon ports. They had seen only what the humans allowed them to see. And now, the truth unfolded in fire and ruin. Vashdor, the ship's chief scientist, staggered to the sensor array, his copper-plated fingers trembling over the holographic readouts. His voice was a rasp of disbelief. Their weapons, they weren't dormant. They were cloaked. Draltal's spines flared. Explain. Vashdor pulled up the data. The human railguns had no thermal buildup, no energy bleed, no magnetic distortion. They had fired from nothingness, their projectiles appearing only in the microseconds before impact. Like ghosts, like predators, a new alert screamed across the bridge. The Indomitable was moving, not in a retreat, not in a defensive posture, but forward, closing the distance with terrifying precision. Draltal's blood ran cold. This wasn't a warship, it was a hunter. Aboard the Indomitable, Colonel Elizabeth Davis watched the Dralethian vessels, death throes with detached calm. The enemy's shields had collapsed in the first volley. Their armor, forged in the fires of their molten homeworld, had shattered like glass. Beside her, Captain John Torres adjusted his tactical display. Their scrambling fighters, small, fast heat burners, looks like. Davis didn't glance at the screen. She already knew the Dralethians relied on thermal signatures, on plasma trails, on the visible, a fatal mistake. Activate Grid 9, she said. Torres input the command. Across the Indomitable's hull, hexagonal panels slid open. Not weapon ports, not missile bays. A lattice of energy, invisible to Dralethian sensors, flared to life. A web of quantum-damped fields, woven between the human ship and its prey. The Dralethian fighters streaked in, their engines blazing like miniature suns. Not destroyed, not disabled. One moment, they were there. The next, they were gone, their signals winking out of existence mid-burn. Vashdor's scream echoed across the Molten Vengeance's bridge. They ate them. Draltal's claws flexed. The humans had turned space itself into a weapon, and his fleet had flown right into it. On the Indomitable's bridge, Torres exhaled, grids holding, no bleed, no feedback. Davis nodded. The Dralethians had scanned them, had studied them, had thought they understood. They had seen nothing, because humanity had hidden everything. And now the lesson continued. Prepare the next volley, Davis said. The Indomitable obeyed. The Molten Vengeance shuddered as if the void itself had taken a breath and held it. Draltal's command talons dug into the armrests of his throne, the dark metal groaning under the pressure. His secondary eyes, 6 in total, flickered in rapid succession, processing the impossible. The human ship, the Indomitable, hung in space like a specter, its outline blurred by something his sensors refused to define. Not cloaking, not shielding, something worse. Vashdor's voice crackled through the comms, distorted by the same interference that had swallowed their fighters whole. High Commander, the energy readings. They're not just masking their signature, they're inverting it. Draltal's blood ran cold. Inversion, a theoretical concept, one the Dralethian forges had deemed too unstable for practical warfare. The idea of bending sensor returns back into themselves, of making a ship not just invisible, but non-existent to detection. It was madness. The energy required would tear any known vessel apart. The humans had done it. His tactical display flickered, the orange-red holograms of his remaining fighters pulsing erratically. The Indomitable was a void in the data stream, a black hole in the middle of his fleet's awareness. His warriors fired blind, their plasma lances carving through empty space where the human ship should have been, where it wasn't. A low, grinding noise built in Draltal's throat. This was not battle. This was butchery. On the Indomitable, Colonel Elizabeth Davis watched the Dralethian fleet flail. Her fingers traced the edge of the tactical holodisplay, where the enemy ships burned in frantic, useless patterns. They had expected a war of fire and steel. They had prepared for a clash of brute force, for the kind of warfare their own brutalist machinery excelled in. They had not prepared for this. "Torres," she said, her voice calm. "Status on the secondary grid." Captain John Torres didn't look up from his console. His hands moved with the precision of a surgeon, adjusting frequencies, tightening the quantum net that ensnared the Dralethians. Holding at minor fluctuations near their capital ship, they're trying to force a scan through the interference. Davis allowed herself a small, grim smile. Let them try. The Indomitable's stealth wasn't just a shield, it was a mirror. Every sensor pulse the Dralethians sent out bounced back, twisted, feeding them false data, ghost images of ships that didn't exist, of weapons that weren't there. Their own systems were betraying them, and they didn't even know it yet. "Activate the next phase," Davis ordered. Torres nodded. A single command rippled through the ship's neural net. Somewhere in the dark, the Indomitable's weapons woke up. Vashdor's console erupted in a storm of warnings. His claws scrambled over the interface, his mind racing to parse the sudden flood of data. The Molten Vengeance's sensors screamed, not at the human ship, but at themselves. "High Commander," he barked. The deck lurched. A sound like the universe tearing open reverberated through the hull. On the view screen, space rippled, and then the Indomitable was there. Not decloaking, not emerging from stealth, but unfolding into reality, as if it had always been present, and the universe had simply refused to acknowledge it until now. Its weapons glowed. Draltal's spines flattened against his skull. The humans hadn't just hidden their ship. They had hidden the entire battle, and now, at last, they were done playing dead. Section Faye. The trap springs. The Molten Vengeance's bridge flickered under the sudden assault of emergency lighting, the orange-red glow of its plasma conduits flaring as if in protest. Draltal's claws dug into the command console, his exoskeleton vibrating with the aftershocks of the Indomitable's emergence. His secondary eyelids snapped shut against the blinding glare of human weapon signatures that had not existed in their scans mere moments ago. Vashdor's voice cut through the chaos, raw with disbelief. They rewrote our sensor logs. It wasn't just stealth. It wasn't just deception. The humans had edited reality itself. The Indomitable hung before them, no longer a ghost, but a leviathan wreathed in the cold blue fire of its own systems. Its hull, once thought to be smooth and unremarkable, now bristled with weapon ports, each one humming with a resonance that made the Dralethians' auditory pits ache. The ship's silhouette warped the light around it, as if space itself hesitated to touch it. Draltal's mind raced. His tactical training screamed at him to retaliate, But his instincts, older, deeper, whispered something else. This was never a battle. This was a dissection. Aboard the Indomitable, Colonel Elizabeth Davis watched the Dralethian flagship through the holographic display. Her fingers steepled. The enemy's confusion was palpable even through the void. She had seen this reaction before, on the faces of warlords, pirates, even the few surviving specimens of the Zenthian swarm. That moment, when predators realized they had stepped into another predator's den. Phase 2, she murmured. Torres, standing at the tactical station, input the command without hesitation. His neural link flared, syncing with the ship's AI. The Indomitable's railguns charged. On the molten vengeance, the targeting alarms shrieked. Draltal's spines flared in reflexive aggression, but his blood ran cold as the human ship's weapons locked on. Not to their engines, not to their weapons array, but to the exact structural weak points in their armor plating. Points the Dralethians had spent centuries concealing. Vashdor's claws trembled over his console. I've mapped our entire ship down to the microns. The realization hit Draltal like a molten spear. The humans hadn't just hidden their strength. They had spent this entire engagement learning theirs. Space tore open. The Indomitable's railguns fired. Not with the crude kinetic fury the Dralethians expected, but with eerie precision. The projectiles struck in perfect sequence, each impact resonating through the molten vengeance's hull like a surgeon's scalpel. Conduits burst. Plasma vents sealed themselves in panicked emergency protocols. The ship groaned, its industrial heart faltering. Draltal staggered as the gravity stabilizers flickered. His warriors, bred for conquest, now clutched at consoles to keep from floating adrift. And then, silence. The Indomitable hadn't destroyed them. It had disarmed them. Davis exhaled slowly. The Dralethian ship hung dead in space, its forge, like energy signatures dimmed to embers. She had seen this before, too, the exact moment an enemy understood the depth of their miscalculation. Torres glanced at her. Orders. She smiled, not in triumph. In anticipation. Now, she said, we talk. On the molten vengeance, Draltal stared at the viewscreen, at the human ship that had dismantled his pride without firing a single lethal shot. For the first time in his life, the High Commander of the Dralethian Armada felt fear, not of death, of what came next. The silence on the molten vengeance was not the quiet of defeat. It was the stillness of a predator realizing it had become prey. Draltal's claws flexed against the command console, the dark metal groaning under his grip. His warriors stood frozen, their spines rigid, their orange, red eyes flickering between their crippled systems and the monstrous human vessel that loomed before them. The Indomitable hadn't just disabled them, it had humiliated them. Every weapon, every shield, every thruster had been neutralized with surgical precision, as if the humans had known their ship's schematics before the battle had even begun. And perhaps they had. Vashdor, his scientist's crest flattened in distress, hissed through gritted teeth as he scanned the wreckage of their systems. They didn't brute force through our defenses, he muttered. They unraveled them like pulling threads from cloth. Draltal's mandibles twitched. The Dralethian Armada had never been outmaneuvered. Their technology was forged in the fires of conquest, their ships built to endure the molten fury of a dozen warring systems. Yet this human vessel, this sleek, angular monstrosity, had dismantled them without breaking a sweat. His warriors waited for orders, for rage, for the command to fight to the last breath. But Draltal hesitated for the first time in his life. He questioned. On the Indomitable, Colonel Davis watched the Dralethian ship through the viewscreen, her fingers steepled beneath her chin. The enemy vessel hung adrift, its once blazing plasma cores now dimmed to a dull, smoldering red. She had seen this before, the moment an adversary realized they had underestimated humanity. Captain Torres stood beside her, his gaze locked on the alien warship. They're not signaling surrender, he noted. Davis smirked. They don't know how. The Dralethians were warriors, bred for battle, their culture built on dominance. Surrender was a foreign concept, an insult to their very existence. And yet, they had been stopped, not by overwhelming force, but by precision. By ingenuity, Davis tapped a command into her console. Open a channel, a flicker of movement on the view screen. The Dralethian bridge, its angular architecture bathed in emergency lighting. The alien commander stood at the center, his massive frame rigid, his molten gaze burning with defiance. Davis leaned forward. "Now," she murmured, "let's see if they're as smart as they are proud." Draltal's crest flared as the human's face appeared on his screen. A soft-skinned creature, unarmored, unafraid, her eyes held no mockery, no gloating, only curiosity. "Hi, Commander Draltal," she said, her voice calm. "You've lost this battle, but you don't have to lose the war." His warriors bristled. A human, daring to speak to him as an equal. She hadn't destroyed them. That was the thought that coiled in his mind like a serpent. The humans could have obliterated the molten vengeance in seconds. Instead, they had chosen to disable it. Vashdor's voice was a whisper. "They're not conquerors." Draltal's claws tightened. They were something far more dangerous. The silence on the molten vengeance was thick, oppressive, the weight of realization pressing down on the Dralethian crew like the gravity of a dying star. The bridge hummed with the low pulsing thrum of emergency power, the orange-red glow of the control panels casting jagged shadows across the segmented metal walls. The air smelled of scorched alloy and overheated plasma conduits, the scent of defeat. Draltal did not move. His claws remained embedded in the command console, molten eyes locked on the human commander's face. She was still there, still watching him, her expression unreadable. "Just assessment. They could have killed us." The thought was a blade twisting in his gut. The humans had torn through their defenses like they were nothing. Their weapons had bypassed Dralethian shielding as if it were mere superstition. Their ships had moved with impossible precision, dancing through the kill zones of his fleet, as though they had rehearsed this battle 1,000 times. They had stopped. Vashdor's voice was barely audible over the static, laced silence. "They're waiting." Draltal's crest flared, the spines along his back stiffening. Waiting for what? Surrender? Submission? The human commander Davis had said something else. "You don't have to lose the war." His mind raced, sifting through the implications. The Dralethian Empire had faced countless enemies. They had crushed rebellions, shattered fleets, reduced worlds to molten slag. But never had an opponent stopped when victory was assured. Never had they been offered. What? Mercy negotiation? The idea was alien, unthinkable. His warriors were still alive. His ship, though crippled, was intact. The humans had not boarded. They had not unleashed some horrific weapon to melt flesh from bone. They had simply stopped. Vashdor stepped closer, his voice low. "They do not fight like conquerors." Draltal exhaled, the sound a hiss of steam through his vents. "They burned. They enslaved." The humans had done none of that. His gaze flicked to the tactical display. The remnants of his fleet floated in the void, their engines dark, their weapons silent. The human vessels held position, their sleek, angular forms motionless. Watching, a cold realization settled over him. This was not a battle of strength. It was a test, and he had failed. The humans had not come to destroy. They had come to prove something, and now they were waiting to see if he was smart enough to understand. His claws retracted from the console. "Open a channel," he growled. The bridge crew hesitated. "Now," he snarled. The comms officer obeyed. Draltal straightened, his massive frame rigid with defiance. But beneath it, something unfamiliar stirred. The human commander's face reappeared. This time, he spoke first. "What do you want?" His voice was rough, edged with the heat of wounded pride. But beneath the anger, there was something else. The faintest tremor of doubt. Davis tilted her head, just slightly, and then she smiled. The silence on the bridge of the Molten Dawn was absolute. Draltal's claws flexed against the armrests of his command throne, the dark metal groaning under the pressure. His gaze remained locked on the human commander's face. On that smile, it wasn't the bared, teeth threat of a predator, nor the mocking leer of a conqueror. It was something worse. The humans were amused. His secondary heart thrummed faster, pumping molten fury through his veins. His people had ruled the void for centuries. Their fleets had shattered empires. Their forges had birthed warships that burned entire worlds to ash. And yet, these creatures, these soft, fragile creatures, dared to stand before him as if they held all the power. But they did, and that was the unbearable truth. His sensors still screamed at him, their readings flickering between certainty and impossibility. The human vessels were there, physically present, and yet their energy signatures were wrong. Their heat emissions didn't match their mass. Their drive signatures pulsed in rhythms no Dralethian algorithm could parse. It was as if the void itself conspired to hide them, bending light and radiation around their hulls like a cloak. Vashdor, his chief scientist, had gone unnervingly still beside him. The old scholar's crest of sensory spines lay flat against his skull, his orange eyes dilated in something between awe and dread. "They're phasing," Vashdor murmured, his voice barely audible over the hum of the ship's core. Draltal didn't respond. He didn't need to. He had seen the same readings. The humans weren't just masking their signatures. They were shifting in and out of phase with reality itself, existing in multiple states at once. Their matter flickering between dimensions like a flame dancing between fuel sources. It wasn't stealth. It wasn't even technology as the Dralethians understood it. It was magic. And then, as if to mock him further, one of the human ships, the lead vessel, the one they called Pandora's Spear, simply vanished. Not in a flash of light, not with the shudder of displaced air. It was just gone. One moment, it hung in the void, sleek and deadly. The next, the space it occupied was empty. Draltal's spines flared in alarm. His tactical display stuttered, recalculating, searching, and then the ship reappeared. Behind them, a chorus of warning chimes erupted across the bridge. The spear had slipped past their rear defenses, without a single thruster burn, without a single ripple in the void. It floated there now, its weapons humming to life, its targeting locks painting the Molten Dawn's engines with cold, clinical precision. A message flashed across the comms. A single word. No threat, no demand, just a statement. Draltal's jaws clenched. They could have killed him. They could have torn his ship apart the moment they phased behind him. But they hadn't, because this wasn't war. This was a lesson, and for the first time in his long, brutal life, Draltal felt the icy touch of something he had never known. Not of death, not of defeat, but of the realization that everything he knew, everything his people had built, everything they believed about their place in the cosmos, was wrong. And now, they were showing him exactly what happened when they stopped. The silence on the Molten Dawn's bridge was absolute. Draltal's claws flexed against the command console, the dark metal groaning under the pressure. His crew stood frozen, their spines rigid, their eyes locked on the human warship hovering in their aft display. It was a sleek, angular predator, its hull a matte black that drank in the light, its edges blurred by some kind of refractive coating that made it flicker in and out of perception like a ghost. They had scanned it, they had seen nothing, and now it was here, its weapons live, its presence, a silent declaration of dominance. Vashdor's voice was a whisper, his vocal cords strained with disbelief. Their stealth systems, they don't just mask emissions, they bend light, they distort space. This isn't cloaking, this is erasure. Draltal didn't respond. His mind was still reeling from the implications. The humans had let them see only what they wanted them to see. Their colonies, their ships, Their defenses, all carefully curated illusions designed to lull the galaxy into underestimating them. And now, with a single maneuver, they had shattered that illusion. The comm crackled again. This time, it wasn't a word. It was an image, a transmission from the human warship's bridge. A woman stood at its center, her posture relaxed, her hands clasped behind her back. She wore no armor, no ceremonial garb, just a simple black uniform, its insignia, a silver eagle clutching a sword and a cluster of stars. Her dark hair was pulled back, her expression calm, almost bored. Colonel Elizabeth Davis. Draltal recognized her from the intelligence briefings. The humans called her the Iron Diplomat. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The message was clear in the way she stood, in the way her crew moved around her with quiet efficiency, their faces unreadable. We are not afraid of you. We never were. Draltal's blood ran cold. For centuries, the Dralethian Dominion had ruled through fear. Their ships were fortresses, their weapons forged in the heart of dying stars. They had crushed empires, broken fleets, and left worlds burning in their wake. And yet this woman, this human, looked at them as if they were nothing more than an inconvenience. Vashdor exhaled sharply. They're not just hiding their strength, they're hiding their numbers. Draltal's gaze snapped to him. The scientist's fingers trembled as he pulled up a secondary display, overlaying the human warship's energy signature with known profiles. This vessel, it's not a prototype. It's not even their flagship. Its design is too refined, too optimized. This is a standard warship, which means they have more. Draltal's mandibles tightened. The humans had played the galaxy for fools. They had let the Dralethians, the Varathi, the entire Council of Sovereigns believe they were weak, scattered, divided. And now, with a single uncloaking, they had revealed the truth. They had always been ready. A new transmission flickered across the screen. A data packet, unencrypted, broadcasting on every frequency. Draltal opened it, and his breath left him in a rush. It was a map, a star chart marked with hundreds of human colonies, shipyards, listening posts, none of which had appeared in Dominion intelligence reports. Some were in deep space, hidden in nebulae or asteroid belts. Others were nestled in the gravity wells of black holes, their signatures masked by the cosmic noise. And then there were the fleets, dozens of them, each one larger than the last. Vashdor made a sound like a dying engine. This is impossible. We've been watching them for decades. How did they? Draltal didn't answer. He couldn't, because the final image in the transmission wasn't a threat. It wasn't a warning. It was an invitation. A single line of text written in perfect Dralethian script. You wanted to see what we were hiding. Now you have. The question is, what will you do next? The screen went dark, and for the first time in his life, Draltal, High Commander of the Dominion's Third Fleet, felt the weight of something he had never known. The command deck of the Molten Will was silent. Not the silence of discipline, nor the quiet of focus, but the hollow, suffocating stillness of a predator realizing it had stepped into a trap. The orange glow of the ship's plasma conduits pulsed weakly, casting jagged shadows across the faces of the Dralethian crew. Their armored plating, usually gleaming with the pride of an unstoppable empire, now seemed dull. Heavy Draltal did not move. His claws remained embedded in the command console, the metal groaning under the pressure. The holographic display before him had gone dark, but the images burned behind his eyes. Human fleets, hidden colonies, weapons that defied Dominion understanding, decades of watching them, decades of dismissing them. And now, in a single transmission, they had unraveled centuries of Dralethian certainty. Vashdor's voice was a rasp, his vocal emitters strained. High Commander, the tactical projections. Draltal cut him off with a flick of his crest. He didn't need to hear the numbers. He had already calculated them. The Dominion's Third Fleet was formidable, a juggernaut of molten steel warships, plasma lances capable of glassing continents, and boarding drones that could strip a vessel clean in minutes. But against an enemy that had somehow concealed entire armadas in the void. It wasn't a battle, it was suicide. A low chime echoed through the deck, an alert from the sensor array. The human fleet was moving, not toward them, not yet, but shifting position, their formations tightening like the coils of a serpent preparing to strike. Draltal exhaled, the heat of his breath fogging the console's surface. "Recall our forward elements." The words tasted like ash. Vashdor stiffened. "You're ordering a retreat." Draltal turned, his eyes burning with the same molten intensity as his ship's core. "I am ordering survival." The Dominion had never retreated, not once in its 1,000-year conquest of the stars. To withdraw was to admit weakness, to show fear. But Draltal was no fool. He had seen the truth in those human transmissions. Their ships were not just hidden, they were designed to be unseen. Their weapons were not just powerful, they were engineered to dismantle empires, and their message, that mocking, calculated invitation, was not a plea for mercy. It was a test, one he would not fail. Across the fleet, the order rippled through the comms. Engines flared as Dralethian destroyers pivoted, their massive hulls groaning under the strain of sudden maneuvers. The forward scouts, still lingering near the edge of human space, hesitated. Just for a moment, before their commanders overrode protocol and burned hard for the rally point. They had expected resistance. They had expected defiance. They had not expected silence. The human fleet did not pursue. They simply watched. Draltal's claws flexed. The Dominion would call this cowardice. The High Synod would demand answers. But he had seen what they had not. The cold, patient calculation in humanity's strategy. They had let the Dominion see their strength. And now, they were waiting to see what the Dralethians would do with that knowledge. The Molten Will's engines thrummed as the ship turned, its massive frame aligning with the retreat vector. Behind them, the stars burned cold and distant, and somewhere in that darkness, unseen, humanity watched and waited. The silence was worse than the battle. Draltal stood motionless in the command nexus of the Molten Will, his claws retracted, but his muscles coiled tight. The holographic displays flickered with tactical readouts, damage assessments, energy expenditures, the scattered remnants of the fleet regrouping in staggered formations. The numbers were not catastrophic. The losses were minimal. The Dominion had not been defeated, but they had been seen. The human fleet had not fired a single shot. They had not pursued. They had simply existed, a wall of silent, impossible warships that defied every known principle of war. Their armor absorbed scans like a void. Their weapons, if they even had weapons, remained hidden beneath layers of deceptive plating. And now, they watched. Draltal's secondary heart pulsed erratically. He had commanded fleets for 3 solar cycles. He had crushed rebellions, burned worlds, and shattered orbital fortresses with the molten fury of Dominion engineering. This was not war. This was a test. Vashdor's talons trembled as he scrolled through the sensor logs for the 7th time. The data was there, crisp and undeniable, yet his mind refused to reconcile it. The human vessels had no heat signatures, no energy bleed, no reactor pulses. They were ghosts. And yet, when the Molten Will's targeting arrays had locked onto the lead human dreadnought, the system had screamed, a cascade of warnings flooding the bridge as if the ship itself recoiled in primal terror. Shields destabilizing, target lock failure. Energy surge detected, source unknown. Vashdor had seen Dominion warships gutted by plasma lances, had watched as entire battle groups were reduced to molten slag by the Synod's wrath. This was something else. The humans had not fought. They had allowed the Dominion to see them, and that thought was more terrifying than any weapon. Colonel Elizabeth Davis exhaled slowly, her fingers tracing the edge of the tactical display. The Dralethian fleet was retreating, not in panic, not in disarray, but with the measured, disciplined withdrawal of a predator that had just realized it was no longer the apex. She had expected arrogance. She had expected blind aggression. Instead, she saw calculation. The Dralethians were warriors. Yes, but they were not fools, her calm crackled. Colonel, orders. Captain Torres' voice was calm, but she could hear the tension beneath it. The entire fleet was coiled tight, waiting for the word. She let the silence stretch. Hold position. They'll be back, Torres said. Davis smiled. The Molten Will's engines burned crimson as the fleet regrouped, their molten cores casting long, bloody shadows across the void. Draltal stared at the star chart, at the empty space where the human fleet had been. They had not pursued, they had not gloated, they had simply let them go. And that, more than any defeat, was what unsettled him. The Dominion had come expecting to crush a fledgling species. Instead, they had found something far worse, a predator that did not need to bare its teeth to prove its strength. Draltal's claws flexed. The High Synod would demand answers, and for the first time in his life, he did not know what to tell them. The Molten Will's command deck was unnervingly quiet. The usual hum of Dralethian machinery, deep, resonant, like the pulse of a forge, was muted, as if the ship itself was holding its breath. Draltal stood motionless before the tactical display. The holographic afterimage of the human fleet still burned into his retinas. They had retreated, not in disarray, not in panic, but with a precision that spoke of absolute control. No taunts over comms, no final salvo to mark their victory, just silence. It was wrong. Dralethians understood war as a roaring inferno, a clash of molten fury where dominance was proven through sheer, overwhelming force. But this was something else. The humans had not fought like cornered prey. They had fought like hunters who knew exactly when to strike and when to let their prey run. Vashdor approached, his armored plating shifting with the quiet hiss of hydraulics. The scientist's ocular implants flickered as he studied the same empty void on the display. "They let us go," he said, voice low. Draltal's claws flexed against the console. A mistake, or a message. The words settled between them like the slow cooling of molten steel. Vashdor called up the battle data, the holograms painting the air in jagged orange and crimson. The human ships had moved with impossible coordination, their maneuvers too fluid, too aligned. No hesitation, no missteps, as if every pilot, every gunner, every engineer was a single mind. "Their systems are networked beyond anything we've seen," Vashdor murmured. "Not just linked, merged. Their ships think together, react together." Draltal exhaled, the heat of his breath fogging the display and their weapons. Vashdor hesitated. That alone was answer enough. The humans had not used their full arsenal. That much was clear. Their railguns had fired at half capacity. Their plasma lances had never fully charged. Even their point defense systems had been restrained, picking off only the missiles that truly threatened them. It wasn't a battle, it was a demonstration. Draltal's mandibles tightened. The High Synod would demand a report. They would want strategies, weaknesses, projections. But what could he tell them? That the humans had fought without desperation, without fear, that they had looked upon the Dominion's might and found it lacking. Outside the viewports, the void stretched endlessly, cold and indifferent. Somewhere in that darkness, the human fleet waited, watching. "They'll be back," Vashdor said softly. Draltal didn't answer, he already knew.